And we are back. Welcome back to the Premier League prediction series. It is time for Game Week 28. Yes, you heard that correctly. Game Week 28 of 38 in the Premier League. It's hard to believe we're almost at the end of another season already. As always, if you haven't done so already, please do consider dropping a like on this video. If you enjoy all of the prediction series we do on this channel, we've just had another European week that has been very successful, so thank you very much for that. And we've got another European week coming up for you next week before we head off into the international break. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any of the content we have got coming up for you over the next few weeks. And don't forget that the future of the channel is in your hands, because over on the community page you still have time to vote on which second league we're going to start covering after the international break is over. But without any further ado, let's look ahead to these 10 Premier League matches after a week where I actually think I've done quite well. Obviously, we've not updated the overall scores for a couple of weeks because we had the FA Cup, but we did 6 out of 10 in the Premier League. We got 7 out of 8 in the FA Cup. Not so good in Europe, but I always go a little bit more rogue in Europe. But all in all, we did manage to get at least one correct score in every single video that we have done over the last 2 weeks. So I'm very happy with that. And I mean the actual correct scoreline spot on. So very pleased with that. All in all, though, as you can see, our season scores are looking a little bit better. So hopefully we can continue that trend today. But I have to tell you right off the bat, this is an incredibly difficult Premier League game week to call. And it starts off with an absolute whopper in the early kickoff on Saturday, because it is third place Nottingham Forest taking on fourth place Manchester City. And if Forest lose this game, they could be out of the Champions League places by the time this weekend is over. Just kind of shows you how much they have slipped over the course of the last few weeks. And that is because they've actually only won one of their last 7 matches in all competitions without penalty shootouts. Because technically they have won 3 of their last 7, but 2 of those games have gone to penalties. That, of course, does mean they've only won 1 of their last 4 Premier League matches, but that was the 7-0 win over Brighton. For City, their run in the last 5 games in the Premier League has been win, lose, win, lose, win. So, habit would suggest that they're probably going to lose this game, but I do think this is going to be a really, really tough game for Nottingham Forest, and I currently do have Manchester City coming into this one. Since Forest have been re-promoted to the Premier League a few seasons ago, they actually haven't beaten Manchester City in 5 attempts so far, and they've actually only scored 1 goal in those 5 matches as well. That came in a 1-1 draw a couple of years ago. Earlier on this season, they lost 3-0 at the Etihad. And like I said, they've not actually scored in any of their last 3 matches against Manchester City either. So even though they're playing much better this season, their record against Manchester City is a horrible one. In terms of injuries and suspensions, the only player that's going to be unavailable for Nottingham Forest is their reserve goalkeeper. So he obviously wouldn't have played anyway. For Manchester City, they are still struggling defensively. Nathan Ake is now set to miss the remainder of the season, but Ruben Diaz is fit and playing again. Also, Rodri's back in training. So obviously he's not going to be available for this game, but I think maybe potentially after the international break we might see an eased return for Rodri over the course of the remainder of this season, but obviously he won't be available for this one. I honestly think this is a really, really tough game to call. As I said already throughout this prediction, I think Manchester City should be considered the favourites for this, given how poor Forest's form has been recently. So I'm going for the opening prediction of the weekend as a 2-1 victory to Manchester City, which would see them leapfrog Forest in the Premier League table. On to the 3 o'clock kickoffs then, and these predictions are not getting any easier anytime soon, because we now have Brighton and Hove Albion taking on Fulham. For Brighton, it is 5 wins in a row for them. And look, as predicted, they won at St James's Park in the FA Cup last weekend. And that was something I was a bit bold in going for, but we got it spot on. 2-1 victory to Brighton in extra time at St James's Park. Of course, they have won every game since that hammering defeat from Nottingham Forest. As for Fulham, they are also playing pretty well at the moment. They have won all of their last 3 away games in the Premier League. Technically, they've won their last 5 games in all competitions, if you want to include that penalty shootout win against Manchester United last week. Again, I'm always a bit iffy about penalty shootouts, because in my head, they should still be seen as draws that are then resulted in a shootout. But whatever, regardless, Fulham technically do have 5 wins away from home in a row. So Really, really tough to call this one. In terms of injuries and suspensions, Brighton are seriously struggling at right back. Tariq Lamptey was sent off against Newcastle in the FA Cup, so he can't play in this game. Veltman is still a major doubt due to his injury, and Kadioglu and James Milner are both definitely out due to injuries. They genuinely could be completely without a right back for this match. For Fulham, they have their own player suspended. Sasa Lukic has managed to pick up 10 yellow cards already in the Premier League this season, which means it's a 2-match ban for him, and he is going to be unavailable for this fixture. In terms of the head-to-head record, Brighton's record against Fulham is absolutely horrendous. They have not won any of the 9 Premier League meetings between the two sides since they both got respectively re-promoted to the Premier League. The last time Brighton beat Fulham was back in the Championship in 2017. So there is really good reason to think that Fulham are going to get a result from this fixture, especially as we mentioned, given the fact that Brighton are probably not going to have a right back for this match. The game earlier in the season at Craven Cottage was a 3-1 victory for Fulham as well. So I'm going to back that trend to continue. I'm not going to say Fulham are going to go to Brighton and get a win, because I think Brighton have been playing well enough to certainly get at least a draw at home to a Fulham side that, again, are playing very well away from home themselves. So I'm going to put this one straight down the middle, and I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Next up, it is Crystal Palace taking on Ipswich, and these are two sides whose forms could not be more contrasting. Crystal Palace, 5 wins and 2 losses in their last 7 Premier League games, and obviously another victory for them in the FA Cup last weekend. For Ipswich, it's no wins in their last 7 Premier League games, losing 6 of those 7, and of course they lost last weekend in the FA Cup in that penalty shootout to Nottingham Forest. So, for me, there isn't really too much more to talk about in terms of this fixture. I think everyone expects Crystal Palace to win this match. If you want even more information, obviously we always cover the injuries and suspensions, and there are potentially a couple of key absentees for Crystal Palace. Most notably and most debatably is whether or not Mateta is going to make it for this match, given that horrendous challenge he suffered in the victory over Millwall. As things stand, he is not going to make it, and Eddie Nketiah is expected to step into his position. One player who is definitely missing for Palace is Will Hughes. He is another player who's already picked up 10 yellow cards, so it's a 2-match ban for him. For Ipswich, Amari Hutchinson is the latest player to pick up an injury for them. They have a very, very growing injury list at the moment, at the absolute worst time in the season, that they're desperately scrambling to get points to survive in the Premier League. Unfortunately, though, I just think they're getting these injuries at the wrong time, and it's going to affect their performances and it's going to affect their results. Ipswich lost 1-0 earlier this season to Crystal Palace at home, and I expect a similar sort of result here. I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory to Crystal Palace. Next up, we have two sides who couldn't be further apart in the Premier League table. There are a lot of matches this week between sides very close to each other. These two quite literally couldn't be further apart. It is top of the league Liverpool taking on bottom club Southampton. A weird mirror as it is, though, because Liverpool are 13 points clear at the top of the Premier League table. Southampton are 13 points from safety. So, you know, it couldn't really be any more polar opposites between these two sides. Again, I really shouldn't have to spend too long talking about this one. Liverpool, of course, off the back of 2 successive 2-0 victories in the Premier League and that incredible 1-0 win over PSG thanks to Alisson and Harvey Elliott. For Southampton, it's 4 defeats in a row, back-to-back 4-0 losses, and yeah, if they go to Anfield and get anything, I would be absolutely stunned. The only thing that could be working in their favour is that I actually think Liverpool will make changes. I've not seen anything to suggest that they will, but they've got the second leg against PSG to come. They've got the League Cup final next weekend. They're already 13 points clear. They're playing the bottom club in the Premier League. It's the perfect opportunity to rest key players. So that could leave an opening for Southampton, but they themselves have a few injury concerns. Ojokuku could be out injured. Bednarek could be out injured, but at least Harwood Bellis is back. For me, it's Liverpool's game to lose. They've already beaten Southampton twice this season at St Mary's. One of those games, they played their reserves in that anyway and still won. So ultimately, I think Liverpool are going to take this pretty comfortably. I'm just going to go for a blanket 3-0 win. On to the first of two late kickoffs then. This is the match between Brentford and Aston Villa. It is the 5:30 match, and unlike Liverpool and Southampton, these two sides are once again just one place apart. This is 10th taking on 11th, or technically 11th taking on 10th. Brentford, of course, being the home side here. A win for Brentford would actually put them 1 point behind Aston Villa with a game in hand. So it is absolutely must win for Villa, who are still trying to get themselves back into the European hunt for next season. A victory for them could see them as high as 5th if other results go their way this weekend. To be fair though, Villa hadn't won any of their last 4 away matches before that victory over Bruges in midweek. Although if it wasn't for that challenge from Tyrone Mings on the goal line, they could have been staring down the back of another defeat away from home. But a very late surge from them and 2 very good goals, well, no goal and then a good goal, means that they take that lead into the second leg. For Brentford, they've not won any matches at home in their last 7. And that dates back to December the 7th. So they are really, really struggling at home at the moment. And Villa, to be fair, like I just said, are really still struggling away from home as well. In terms of injuries and suspensions, Brentford do have 2 key midfielders listed as doubtful for that, and that is Norgard and Jensen. If both miss, I think there could be a real struggle for them. For Aston Villa, they have no fresh injury concerns, and given the fact that they are leading against Bruges, I would expect them to play their strongest side here, knowing that they could potentially make a couple of changes for that second leg with it being at home. And they're still, like I say, desperately trying to push themselves back up the Premier League table. I'm a bit torn on this. I genuinely think this is one that could easily go all of the 3 different ways. I think you can make strong arguments for Brentford to win. I think you can make strong arguments for Aston Villa to win. So I'm going to do what I always do when I'm unsure, and that is absolutely bottle it and go straight down the middle. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one. I do think if you're going to ask me who the actual favourites are, I would just edge it to Aston Villa. But yeah, very, very tough one to call this 2-2 draw. And then the final game on Saturday, taking place at the very late time of 8 o'clock on a Saturday, we have Wolves taking on Everton. And again, these are 2 sides right next to each other. Wolves are 17th, Everton are 16th. The difference here between the Forest City game and the Brentford Villa game is that there are 10 points separating Wolves from Everton here. Just shows how big the gap is from the bottom to the rest of the table at the moment, and just kind of shows how poor Wolves have been this season. Wolves' form is actually the mirror of what's been going on with Manchester City. Their last 5 games have gone lose, win, lose, win, lose. So, stands to reason that they're probably going to win this game against Everton. But, did lose on penalties to Bournemouth in the FA Cup last week as well. As for Everton, they are unbeaten in all of their last 7 Premier League games under David Moyes. They're absolutely flying. But, it has to be noted, they have a horrendous record when it comes to playing against Wolves in the Premier League. To be fair, they won 4-0 in the game at Goodison earlier on this season, but that is their only win in their last 7 against Wolves, and they have lost 5 of the last 6 up until that victory earlier on. So Wolves' record against Everton is absolutely fantastic. The problem they have got, though, is that they have lost Matheus Cunha once again due to suspension. At the moment, it's unclear how long he is going to be banned for. I think it could be quite a hefty one, because he pushes them, then he kicks them, then he headbutts them. So I'd be surprised if he gets away with anything less than a 5-match ban, Matheus Cunha. As for Everton, they have no fresh injury concerns and will be expected to have Doucouré back in their starting lineup for this one. To be honest, I would be surprised to see Wolves get the victory here. I just think that that is the least likely result given their current form and given how well Everton are playing. I do think, though, that Everton might not have enough to get the victory, so I'm once again going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for 1-1. But it is must-win for Wolves, because they seriously cannot allow Ipswich and Leicester to get back into this. Obviously, they'll already know what's happened to Ipswich earlier on in the day, so that could play a part in how they approach this match, but we'll see. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. On to Sunday then, and speaking of Leicester, they will, of course, know exactly what happened to Wolves the previous night and will know how much of a fight they have got ahead of them as they travel to Stamford Bridge. The problem for them is they have lost their last 5 games in a row, and Chelsea have won their last 2 games in a row Obviously, winning last night in the Europa Conference League with an incredibly much changed side as well. And I got that prediction absolutely spot on, by the way, the 2-1 victory over Copenhagen. For Chelsea, they are still dealing with a fair few injuries, certainly at the back. The latest one is Gusto. He started the match last night at left back, and he had to go off after just 25 minutes. Although if you listened to Enzo Maresca's press conference after the game, seems to suggest that Gusto could be all right for Leicester. Certainly will be all right for the second leg, but we shall see. In terms of Leicester, they actually have no fresh injury concerns, and they're trying to build some sort of momentum. But like I said, it's 5 defeats in a row. And not only that, they also haven't scored in any of their last 3 matches either. They're also coming up against a side that has a very good record against them. Chelsea have won 6 of the last 7 meetings between the two sides since Leicester's famous FA Cup win over Chelsea back in 2021. Chelsea won 2-1 at the King Power earlier on this season. I expect that trend to continue here, and I'm going to go for a 3-0 victory to Chelsea, just like I did last week when I did them to beat Southampton 3-0 as well. The other early kickoff on Sunday sees Tottenham taking on Bournemouth, and for Spurs, it's back-to-back defeats, back-to-back 1-0 defeats. They probably should have lost by more to Manchester City 2 weeks ago, but the League Cup, the Europa League defeat to AZ last night is a really, really poor one from them. Didn't really show any signs of quality throughout the match, and then scored an absolutely horrendous own goal. If you've not seen it, Bergvall tries to clear it from a corner and somehow manages to backwards slice it over his own goalkeeper into the far corner. It's the most Spurs own goal you've ever seen in your life. That said though, Bournemouth technically haven't won any of their last 3 games either. Again, depending on what your views are on penalty shootouts. They, of course, did beat Wolves on penalties last week, but they haven't won a game in 90 minutes in their last 3 attempts. But we know if they get a victory in this match, it puts them right back in that Champions League picture going into the final 10 games of the season. In terms of injuries and suspensions, Bournemouth will still be without Zabarani. He is still serving his ban following that controversial high tackle against Wolves a few weeks ago. He took a hefty ban for that one. For Spurs, the question is how many players are they willing to risk? Obviously, they're already 1-0 down and have that second leg against AZ next week. That is their best chance of getting back into Europe next season, is winning the Europa League. So for me, I think Spurs' priority is going to be that second leg. There is not much more for them to play for in the Premier League right now, so I would be very surprised to see any of those players that are close to a return make an appearance in this match if it's not for more than 10 or 12 minutes. So I actually think Bournemouth should be considered the favourites for this. Bournemouth did win the game earlier this season at the, forgot the name of that stadium, the Vitality Stadium. So I think this may surprise a few people, but I genuinely think Bournemouth are going to win this game. And I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory to Bournemouth. And now it's time for the main event of the weekend. The late kickoff on Sunday is Manchester United against Arsenal at Old Trafford. Two sides who are really, really struggling to score goals at the moment. What's that? Arsenal beat PSV 7-1. Oh dear. So, all week, well, I say all week, over the last couple of weeks when I've been looking at this fixture, the only thing I could see happening was a 0-0 draw. You think about how the FA Cup game went, where it was very back and forth, but, well, I say back and forth. Arsenal dominated, United sat in, but United had chances on the counter-attack. Basically, Arsenal really struggled to break us down, and we didn't offer much going the other way. In my head, this game was going to go down the very same set of lines, where Arsenal try everything they can, we're defensively solid, and ultimately it inevitably ends in a 0-0 draw. The problem is, that's exactly how I thought the PSV game would go. And Arsenal put 7 past PSV. They finally managed to figure out how to put the ball in the back of the net. And against the United side, who, okay, to be fair to them, have started scoring a few more goals over the last couple of weeks, I think they're really going to struggle to score against an Arsenal side that are usually very defensively solid and have their regular backline back to full fitness. Yes, of course, they are still struggling for strikers, but if they can score 7 against PSV, I do unfortunately think as a Manchester United fan they're going to score at least one at Old Trafford. Obviously, Dorgu is going to be suspended for this one for Manchester United as well, which means that either Dalot or Mazraoui are going to have to play at left back unless they're playing teenager Harry Amas. For Arsenal, no fresh injury concerns for them. And I'm even seeing reports that Bukayo Saka could be at least on the bench for this game. I'd be very surprised if that does actually happen, but I have seen a few reports suggesting that Saka could be back for this game at Old Trafford at the weekend. Ultimately, though, I expect Arsenal to get this result. I would love to see United produce a good performance here and produce another good result like they did against Arsenal earlier on in the FA Cup, like they did against City, like they did against Liverpool. But that 7-1 in midweek has just swayed me in Arsenal's favour. So I'm going to go for 1-0 to Arsenal. It could be more. I could see this potentially being a 2-1 or a 3-1 to Arsenal. But in my head, I still think it's going to be a low-scoring game. So I'm going to go for 1-0 to Arsenal. And then finally, we have the Monday night football between West Ham and Newcastle. Two Uniteds taking each other on, but two Uniteds with contrasting forms. For West Ham, it is back-to-back victories without conceding. For Newcastle, it is back-to-back defeats. And not only that, they have lost their entire left-hand side of the pitch for this match. Firstly, Lewis Hall is injured. He's picked up an ankle injury, which could see him miss the entirety of the rest of this season, which is a real shame for him because I expect him to be Thomas Tuchel's left back in the England squad coming out in a couple of days' time. As for, not only that, they've also lost Anthony Gordon. He was sent off. I can't even talk right now. He was sent off in the FA Cup defeat to Fulham for shoving one of the defenders in the face. He is not only going to miss this game, but he is going to miss the League Cup final against Liverpool as well. And not only that, Sven Botman's injury seems to be a little bit worse than first initially thought, so he is going to be missing for Newcastle as well. For West Ham, they have no fresh injury concerns and could even see Paqueta and Sofal make a return for this game. They are playing very, very well in the 3-5-2 system under Graham Potter at the moment. The Jarrod Bowen, Mohamed Kudus sort of like double false nine, taking it in turns to make the runs in behind. It seems to be working really well for them. They've got a much better defensive structure in place over the last couple of weeks. Like I say, back-to-back clean sheets for them. And against a Newcastle side that are depleted with injuries, struggling for form, and I think will have one mind on that League Cup final next week, rather than concentrating on trying to get back into those Champions League places. For me, I expect West Ham to get the victory here. I'm going to end this prediction video with a nice 2-1 victory to West Ham United. And as always, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let me know on anything you think I have missed. Don't forget to check out the community page where you can still have your say on what second league we're going to start covering after the international break. Thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you very soon.